Oh, hello YouTube. Today in the Naughty Librarian, I am reviewing The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Now, was this supposed to be drunk classics? Yes, it was. Did I get drunk? No, I did not. For multiple reasons, I'll explain. Reason number one, this is scary. I couldn't be drunk and scared. It would not be good. Reason number two, this is the book I got at a used book sale. This is from 1974. It's almost an original print of the source material. I got the audiobook to go along with it because that's how I do everything. I always have an audiobook. The audiobook is the 40th anniversary edition, and it's a completely different text. They rewrote it, a lot of it. I would say it's about a 60% match to the original content. You heard that right, 60. 60. That is not a high percentage of matching. So like I'm listening and looking and like there's whole scenes added, there's whole scenes subtracted, almost all of the dialogue is different. And I was like, this just is a lot. So like I couldn't be that confused listening and reading things that don't match, like, and being drunk, like, forget it. Like I would have had no reading comprehension. But I read the whole thing and I can review it still and make jokes. I just will not be drunk for it, but hopefully I will also be funny sober. So let's go. So we start off with a prologue, and it's about this Father Marin. He's an older priest and a archaeologist. So he's kind of like doing his Indiana Jones fantasy. He's at the archaeological dig and he's finding all these little artifacts, and he finds this like little statue of a demon named Pazuzu. And Pazuzu is actually an ancient Assyrian demon. It's a well-documented demon. It's a real thing. He finds a little statue of it. It's grotesque. It has a huge boner. And he's like, oh, shit's about to get real. I know it. Like, he just knows this is like a bad omen. And you know what? Same. I'd probably feel the same way, because when you find a boner you're not expecting to see, it does kind of ruin your day. So like, I get it. He found a little boner statue and he's just like, well, the day's ruined. Something bad's about to happen. like girl, same. So let's get into that bad shit that's about to start happening. We're gonna cut over to America. We're in Georgetown, which is like right outside of like Washington, D.C. for everybody not in America. That's where it is. And we're following this little girl. Her name's Reagan, right? She's living in a rental house with her mom. Her mom's name is Chris. She's kind of like a famous actress. And she's in town to film a movie. And they're living here with Carl and Willie. They're like the housekeepers, and they're an old married couple. And Chris's assistant, Sharon. They all are living in this little house. And things start off really, like, innocuous a little bit. Like, one night Chris starts hearing, like, tapping sounds. Like, weird tapping sounds coming from Reagan's room. And she's like, what is that? So she goes and checks. And there's nothing unusual going on. The room feels really cold. Mind you, it's an old house. So she's like, I guess it's just cold in here. And the tapping seems to be coming from, like, the ceiling. So it's probably rats. So, you know, it's an old house, there's rats or something. So it starts off very innocuous. Like, maybe get some rat traps, see what's going on here. Also, Reagan is, you know, she's a kid and it's the 70s. She's playing with like a Ouija board kind of thing. You know, she's just like talking on a Ouija board, pretending to talk to someone named Captain Howdy. Like, Captain Howdy, the scariest of demon names, am I right? You know? So Reagan's always just like a little subdued all the time. And, you know, just she's 12, she's kind of moody, she's playing with her Ouija board, talking to Captain Howdy. So, again, her mom's kind of like not too concerned about it yet, mainly just because her and the father just had a bad divorce, and the kid is like, you know, probably dealing with that. Again, these are all normal things that could be written off, but they all keep adding up. And Reagan starts getting worse and worse. Like, it comes across kind of like a bad case of ADHD, maybe. And Chris thinks she's just lying about things because Reagan's like, shit is moving on their own. My dresser's across the room. It's a big dresser. I'm a little girl. Do you think I can move that thing? I can't. I don't know why you think it's moved, and I did it. But like, no one's believing Reagan when she says like things are happening. And also, she, like, the mouth on this kid, like all of a sudden she starts swearing a lot. Like a lot. And mind you, Chris has his friend who's a director named Burke. And Burke is like an elaborate swearer. Like, he's also a bit of a drunk, and he's English. So his level of swearing is off the charts. And the kids probably heard some of this like swearing. So again, you know, acting out and like learning creative swears from a friend. It's like, again, it's starting to get worse, but not unusual yet. It's unusual, but not bad yet. That kind of situation. So Chris is like, all right, I'm gonna bring her to like a doctor, and they do, and the doctor's like, okay, it's probably ADHD. She's obviously a little erratic. Like, let's put her on Ritalin and see what happens. So they start treating her with Ritalin, and guess what? The pills have no effect. Reagan is still really erratic, still getting worse. Chris is still kind of trying to have like her professional career going, so she's still trying to keep mind of that. And she saw this big dinner party, and she invites a bunch of like interesting people over. There's like an astronaut, there's a statesman, a couple priests are there, a psychic, and like just all these different people she's met around town who are kind of interesting. And you know, they're at a dinner party, they're gossiping and stuff, and you start hearing about other weird shit that's happening in the neighborhood, because there's like all these churches around. There's a lot of churches in Georgetown, in Washington D.C. area. And like there's this big like Catholic church, and they had been desecrated recently, like gross stuff like poop. Like there's a lot of poop like play in this church apparently. They get really into the poop stuff, and I'm like, okay, like we get it. and like some people are worried that it's kind of like maybe a black mass situation. Maybe there's like you know, satanic panic. This was kind of this era. I mean, it was really more of the 80s, but this is the 70s. It's kind of building into that. The satanic panic is always in the background. So they're wondering like, oh, I don't know. Maybe there's like, you know, a satanic cult in town, and like this church is getting desecrated. So like there's the weird things going on here. And at one point in the party, like Reagan comes downstairs, and she's like in her nightgown and just all creepy. And she just starts like peeing like a racehorse, just like all over the rug. And I was like, wait a minute, like, okay. And she's like, she goes to the astronaut, she starts pointing at him, she's like, you're gonna die up there. Like, just creepy stuff. And while you're peeing saying it, like, that's even creepier. So everyone starts leaving after that, because like, really, you're not gonna top that as the evening's entertainment. So everyone starts leaving. And after everyone departs finally, like Reagan starts screaming. She's back up in bed. She's screaming. Chris like, oh my God, what's going on? She runs up there, and like the whole bed is just like shaking like crazy. And Reagan has been like freaking out, because Reagan has been saying for days her bed shakes and no one believes her. And she's like, ah! And like Chris is like, oh my God, what is happening here? Like, this is like the first genuinely weird shit thing she's seen that cannot be explained by, well, it's an old house. So after this, we're going to take a break from them. We're going to go over and meet like our other players in this game here. So we have Father Karras, right? And he has kind of lost his faith. He's going through a lot in his like personal life and dealing with like his mother. And I feel like his mother's also mentally ill, and just like a lot of guilt. And he just doesn't feel like he feels at one with God anymore. He's also a doctor. He went to like Harvard Medical School and stuff. He's a psychiatrist. So he's really well educated and a priest, and he's lost his faith. He's kind of desperate for his faith to come back, though. He really wants it back. And then to top things off, his mother passes away, and she was alone, and like it just really deteriorates his faith even more, and he just gets really depressed. So that's where we're starting off with Father Karras. That's kind of like the basis of his character. But anyways, back to Chris and Reagan. So Chris, she takes the kid to another doctor, and she's like, Ritalin ain't working. What else you got, pal? So they do all of these tests, like CT scans and everything, and they're trying to figure out what's wrong with this kid. Maybe it's like a brain lesion. They don't know. So they're actually good doctors. They're doing a lot of like tests to try to figure out what's going on here. However, none of the tests are coming up with anything conclusive. Essentially, they're like, your kid's healthy, but like mentally disturbed. It has to be a mental disorder here, because nothing's physically wrong. And since the doctors just can't do anything for her, Reagan keeps getting worse and worse. And like one night, Chris is like frantically calling the doctor. She's like, you got to get your ass over to the house right now, because it is some straight up demonry happening. So like Reagan is like getting tossed around the room by like unseen hands, and like talking in like a guttural voice that's not her own, and like violently masturbating, and like just throwing shit across the room, throwing grown man doctors across the room, and her body's just like contorting into weird shapes. And the doctors are like, well, that was one hell of a seizure. Let's give her a sedative. And I'm like, what? It feels like lazy doctoring at this point. It's just like, well, guess it was a seizure. All of that shit was a seizure. Like, bro, like, bro. Like, I get it, you're an educated man of science, but like, that's not a fucking seizure. Like, let's be real. Like, try another diagnosis here. That being said, the doctors are like, listen, you should probably go find a psychiatrist at this point. Like, this shit's crazy. So Reagan's is asleep and she's like, all right, Chris is just gonna try to move on with her night. Except someone called her on the phone and they're like, hey, Chris, did you hear? And she's like, no, hear what? And her friend Burke, the director with the creative swears, just fell down the stairs that are literally right outside of her house and like lead into a subway. He fell down those stairs and died, like just like a few hours ago. And she's like, oh my gosh, so like her kid is having all these disorders and her best friend in town died. Like, Chris is like really getting punished here too. And Reagan's demonry still persisting. They just knocked this kid out, but it doesn't like last for very long because that's when you get the whole like backward crab walk down the stairs thing. And like Sharon's on the stairs as Chris's assistant. And like Reagan's like blah, 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 like, and just like trying to lick her ankles. And like, honestly, this part is kind of funny. It's silly because yes, it's like straight up demonry, and the backwards crab walk down the stairs thing is horrifying. But like, it's the little like tongue thing trying to lick her ankles, which is just kind of like a puppy. So like, crab walk down the stairs terrifying, licking ankles kind of funny. So like, it's a weird blend of the two at this point. It is a little silly. Moving forward, Chris takes her to some psychiatrists, like really good ones, and she's like, fix this. And so they start running tests on Reagan, trying to figure out like what like this psychosis is. So they like hypnotize her, and they're like, we want to talk to the other personality inside Reagan. And the other personality comes out, which, you know, we know is a demon. The doctors don't know this, and it's like a shit show. Like, everything changes. Like, her breath gets stanky, and like, she's talking nonsense, and she gets super strong. Like, she almost rips this doctor's balls off. Like, she just goes blah, right for the nuts, almost rips them off. And like, honestly, the doctor is very professional in this because like, he gets his shit back together and then he goes forward with like treating the patient. And I'm like, you almost got your balls ripped off, homie. You're a professional. But still, the doctor is just like, listen, she needs a lot of help. Like, you need to check her into this like psychiatric hospital for like 2 weeks of intensive care and study to figure out what's going on here. Like, my balls are almost gone. Like, go send her to this hospital. They come home and they're like getting packed up to go check her into this hospital. And at this point, they get a knock on the door again. A new character is being introduced. This is Detective Kinderman. He acts like he's a bumbling idiot most of the time, but he's actually like a really good detective. Like, he's really smart. He figures a lot of shit out. He just acts like an idiot because then people tell him more shit. Crazy like a fox, this guy. So he stops by and he's like, hey, I just have a few questions to ask about Burke's death. Just trying to figure out what happened and like how it happened. He fully believes that Burke was murdered because reason his head was turned completely backwards, which doesn't happen in a fall. There's a lot of muscles and ligaments and bones that have to be broken in order to do that. Doesn't happen in a fall. So he knows like someone flipped this guy's head backwards. So he knows it's a murder and he's trying to like low-key investigate it. But while he's there, he's also just, you know, collecting like evidence casually. He keeps playing with like this little like bird statue that Reagan made for Chris, and it was like painted and stuff. You find out later he like scraped some of the paint off of his nail with his nail on the bird, and he like collects a sample of it and brings it back. And then it's like there's a typewriter and Sharon's typing on it and she like crumples up a piece of paper and throws it away. He like low-key takes the paper with him. He's collecting evidence in this house because he knows someone in this house is involved with Burke's murder and probably the desecration of the churches. And there's several people to choose from. None of them are good candidates because the paint sample matches the paint sample taken from the desecration. So like, the paint in their house was used to desecrate the church. And also the typewriter was the same typewriter used to write like the note in Latin that was left at the church. So all of this evidence is like linking these two, but he doesn't know who did it yet. Like, Kinderman's a good detective. But anyway, enough with police work. Let's get back to like Reagan and the demonry. So the doctors at the clinic, they can't really do much to help Reagan either. She just keeps getting worse. However, it's also the first time a doctor has said the word possession and like meant it, because there is like a mental disorder where they believe that they're possessed by a demon, and perhaps getting an exorcism might get rid of that like mental problem, because it's going to be like power of suggestion type of thing. He kind of starts thinking this might be it, and he's like, lady, like, have you tried a priest? Like, maybe try a priest at this point. Like, your daughter, like, we can't help her. Try a priest. Finally, we have this like diagnosis of like shit's demonry here. So now that they're back home from the clinic, we get to, you know, that scene. Like, we all know that scene. When I say that, if you've seen the movie, you know the scene. It's the one with the crucifix being used sexually, and honestly, I don't think it needed to be in the book at all. This is an on-page, basically, it's an on-page sexual assault of a 12-year-old girl. Why is this in the book? It doesn't need to be in the book, and there's a lot of like horror stories or detective stories that throw in like an on-page sexual assault to show like the bad guy being evil. And it's like, guess what? It's a demon. I already believed it was evil. Like, who are you trying to convince at this point? I don't think like this sexual assault should be a plot device to show evil. This is evil. Look how evil this is. Wow, look how evil and shocking this is. It's like, no. You don't need to put that on the page. I don't think you're qualified to tell that story, sir. So I was very upset by it. And I feel the same way in the movie, but in the book, it's much more graphic. Mind you, the movie is graphic, but like the book has to describe in detail what's happening on page. So it's very graphic, and I don't think it needed to be in the book. I feel gross about it. But after the crucifix scene, like, she's like, Chris is finally like, okay, priest time. We need a priest stat. ASAP, get me a priest. So she gets referred to Father Karras, and she goes to see him, and she is like begging him to help. Mind you, you know, he's also lost his faith a little bit. He's tired, and he's not an exorcist. He's actually a psychiatrist. So he's actually kind of the perfect person to go to. He's a priest and a psychiatrist. Best of both worlds. And she's literally begging him to help. And he's just like, listen, go to a hospital. She's like, we've been to the fucking hospital, homie. Why would I be coming to you if I hadn't? Like, he's like, all right, fine. I'll come look at your kid. So he goes over to the house. And it's as creepy as you would expect it to be. Like, they've got her, like, strapped down to the bed with, like, these big, thick leather straps because she's so strong, and talking all this demon stuff. And it's freaking Karras out because, like, it's a lot to take in all at once. However, you know, his faith isn't very strong. He's also kind of a man of science. He's, like, writing a lot of it off to, like, mental trauma, coincidence, those type of things. And he's like, I don't think the church is going to give an exorcism. Like, all this can be described as mental illness. And she's like, please, I'm begging you, please have an exorcism. Please, whatever it is, what do you need to have them convince the church? Please, because whatever is up in that bedroom right now isn't my fucking daughter. Like, I know who my daughter is. That's not my daughter. That's a thing in that bedroom. So Chris is like, she's not religious, she didn't believe in demons, but she's like come to the point now where she can't like write it off anymore. She's like, that is a fucking thing. Karras, he is genuinely compassionate. He's a compassionate person, so he's like, all right, get me your medical records, I'll research this, I'll see what I could do. Because he does ultimately want to help her. She's a 12-year-old girl. So he gets all this evidence, like copies of her voice pattern and like her medical records, all the stuff he's seen here. And he's trying to put a case together to at least get the church to say okay for an exorcism at this point. Like, I don't know how much research William Peter Blatty did into like Catholic Church and their rules on exorcism and their beliefs, but apparently like telekinesis and telepathy were like natural phenomenons. Sometimes they just happen. They're not necessarily demonic. And I was like, wow, I didn't think that would be a thing. You can't write those into there. They're happening, but like they might not necessarily be demonic. So he's having all these things, like these little things add up, but they're not enough to like fully be written off. Like, he's looking for that smoking gun evidence, and it's not happening. He needs it, but he's not getting it. There's even like the weird gibberish like she speaks sometimes. And they're like, is it another language? Like, knowing languages she's never heard before, maybe that could be demonic. And like, it's not. They find out it's just English backwards, but perfectly done phonetically. So when you play it backwards, it sounds like someone talking forwards. Not like a weird mix-up where it just kind of sounds like words. It's like perfect English backwards. So all of this stuff, like the weird languages, the telepathy, the telekinesis, the smells, the super strength, words like appearing on her body all of a sudden out of nowhere, the languages she knows, like all of it apparently somehow is still scientifically accurate. What? How? Like, like maybe one of the things or two of the things together could be scientifically written off apparently here, but like all of them at the same time, it seems like a lot to be writing it off scientifically. So it would be like quite the coincidence to have literally all of them happen together. I don't know why Father Karras doesn't think that at all, but like for me, I'm just like, that's a lot to be put together. Like, I feel like this is a lot. Even though Father Karras doesn't really have like 100% like lock solid case that this is a demon, he does think an exorcism would ultimately help her psychosis. So he's like, all right, I'll go to the bishop and ask. I do want to help this kid. So he goes to the bishop for permission. And like, he kind of gets approved right away. like post haste. There's very little hassle. So I'm like, wow, that was quick. Why did you just go there like days ago, homie? But yeah, he was just, they were like, okay, fine. We'll bring in another priest though, because apparently you need to have both a psychiatrist and a priest present for an exorcism. And I mean, Karras is a psychiatrist and a priest, but he's never done an exorcism. So they're going to bring in another priest who has done an exorcism. So that's where we get back to the beginning of the book, Father Merrin. And he has done an exorcism before in Africa. And it was like intense. It went on for weeks and like it was a really bad one. So they're like, hey, Merrin, you're on East Coast right now. Why don't you go over to Georgetown? We got like a problem. And Merrin, as soon as he gets like the note, he's just like, that damn demon. Like, he like knew. No one tells him what's happening. Someone just hands him a note and he immediately knows what's happening. He's kind of prescient. I don't know if that was like supposed to be a thing with him, but he just kind of can tell the future a little bit. So he gets up immediately and he just starts packing his bag and he goes straight to Georgetown. So Father Merrin, he gets to town. He goes directly to Chris's house. You know, he doesn't stop past go collect $200. He goes straight to Chris's house and he's like, hi, I'm Father Merrin. I'd like to get started right now. Like, it was, wow, you were efficient, sir. So he shows up and he takes stock of things really quickly. He walks in, he gets that vibe, you know, like vibes. He's like, oh, this is some crazy shit. I know exactly what demon is in here. I knew when I found his boner statue in Africa. So he knows what's about to happen. This is the same demon he fought years ago for that really intense exorcism. This is Showdown Part 2. So he's there, he gets ready. Merrin and Karras, they start getting ready together. He sends Karras for supplies and he prays, he gets ready with his vestments and everything. He's like getting into battle mode, right? So they go up and they start the exorcism literally immediately. And like, I don't think I need to explain that the exorcism is creepy because like, it's an exorcism. But like, you know, all of the exorcism demonry is happening. Like the bed levitates, projectile vomiting, the head spins, obscenities, you know, pretending to be loved ones of the priests. Like all of the usual demonry you would expect to be happening, you know, at an exorcism is happening. However, Merrin, he's like a badass old priest though, because he's like shows up there and the demon's like being a little prick and he's just like, cut that shit out. Like he just yells at it. I mean, he doesn't say shit, he's a priest. But he's like, cut that shit out. And the demon's like, So like it works. Like he's like ballsy. I'm like, okay, Merrin. Like Merrin's dope. Like he's real cool and collected and he's like in charge of things. And Karras, on the other hand, is not that cool and collected. He's freaking out because like he is watching like his faith literally reawaken in like the worst possible way. And these exorcisms, it's not like a little quick thing. It goes on for days. This is going on for days and days. And it's long. It's taxing. Karras, Merrin finally lets Karras go get some rest. Like, you obviously need some rest. So he leaves for a minute. And the second he gets home, he gets a knock on the door from Kinderman, Detective Kinderman. And he's like, can a priest get some sleep? Like, he's a little grumpy. But he goes and talks to Kinderman. And Kinderman, like I said, he's a good detective. He has all of this evidence. And it doesn't point anywhere but to Reagan, a 12-year-old girl, which is insane. But the evidence all points that way. So he's pretty much figured it out. Like, he's like, obviously there's a 12-year-old girl. She is mentally not well, possibly mentally not well to the point of super strength. And there's a dead man that possibly is involved. So hypothetically, if I knew a priest was helping this mentally disabled young girl, and she wouldn't be doing these behaviors anymore, should I just write this off as an accident? You know, hypothetically, Father Karras, like, he solved the case. And Father Karras is like, I got this. And he's like, okay. So good for Kinderman. He's like, I'm still gonna write it off as an accident because it's a 12-year-old girl. I'm not gonna ruin her whole life. She's insane. So, wow, Kinderman, good detective. Karras, he's like, okay, I'm gonna get some rest. He comes back to the house later after he had a little nap. He's gonna help continue with his exorcism. So, you know, he goes there, he has a cup of coffee. He's like, all right, time to go. So he walks back upstairs. He's gonna go help Marin with the exorcism to keep going. However, he gets up there and Marin is dead. Marin had a heart attack. And I think Marin knew this was gonna be his last ride when he went. Like, he was already taking like nitroglycerin pills the whole time. Like, he knew this was gonna be his final ride. So he gets up there and Marin's dead, and the demon is pissed about it because it wanted to keep fighting with Marin. I'm grumpy. I wanted to keep fighting with my friend, and now I can't anymore. So at this point, like, finally, Karras loses his shit. He is now angry priest. And, like, mind you, I am paraphrasing. He's a priest. He's not going to use this many swears, but this is basically the gist. He's like, oh, Mr. Tough Demon guy. Okay, Mr. Tough Demon, you think you're so fucking cool? You're possessing a 12-year-old girl, you bitch. Like, oh, you're such a wuss. Why don't you, like, come try to possess a priest? I'm a grown-ass man. You wanna, like, fuck around? Let's fuck around. He's goading this demon, and the demon's like, fine, I will. And so, like, the demon jumps into him. Mind you, all of this is off page. I don't know why they leave this action and they just tell about what's happening from what people can hear. I don't think it adds to the tension of the scene at all. It just cuts the tension out of it. And it's such a dumb move to leave that action. And I know in the movie they don't, but in the book they do, and it's stupid. But anyway, the demon, it jumps into Karras. He's able to control the demon enough to, like, stop it from hurting the little girl through him. And so he jumps out the window to, like, sacrifice himself and take the demon with him. Baller move. So it's like a really bittersweet kind of ending for him, but also really badass. Like, he regained his faith, which is what he wanted to do. And he gotta stick it to a demon in the end. So, like, he kind of went out in a way I think he would have wanted to. And everyone's freaking out because now they have 2 dead priests. And they're like, oh shit. So Sharon, she runs down to the church to get, like, a priest for Karras because he's not quite dead yet. And they bring over Father Dyer, who was one of Karras' friends. So he's also like, oh my God, what happened? He gives him his last rites before he dies because he's almost dying. He's very close. Gives him his last rites still. So, like, Karras is like, and Karras looks very triumphant when he gets his last rites as he's dying. So, like, suck it, demon. Like, he won this battle in the most badass way. After, you know, the suck it, demon scene, we cut to about, I don't know, 6 months later. And at this point, Regan, you know, she's, after the exorcism, she seemed to be herself again. And she seems to be making a complete recovery. They don't really go into any detail about, like, the trauma this kid has at all. I don't know how much she was fully conscious of while the demon was in her. Like, was she conscious of everything happening, or only, like, certain parts? Or maybe she doesn't remember, is it repressed? I don't know. The kid doesn't seem that traumatized, basically. And I'm like, I think that's a little lazy writing, but okay. So she's on her way to making a full recovery. Like, Father Dyer still checks in on them and stuff. And Detective Kinderman, he's still around. He liked Father Karras a lot too, so he's kind of investigating Karras' death. But ultimately, he ends up ruling it an accident as well, related to all the weird shit that was going on there. He's like, I don't need to know the details. It's weird, and I don't want to. I don't want to know the demonry. And after all, the kid got better, too, in the end, which is what Karras was trying to do, and it worked, so it's getting ruled as an accident. And that's kind of it. You know, Chris and Regan and Sharon and Willie and Carl, all the people living in this house, they all leave, and they're going to go back to L.A., and then that's it. And then Father Dyer and Kinderman kind of have, like, a Casablanca ending where they meet and they're like, we're going to be friends, aren't we? And that's just the end of the book. Like, the kid gets better and they go back to LA. It's very kind of uneventful. But yeah, that's The Exorcist, everybody. A lot happened and it's terrifying and it's very scary, and I would read it and then I would turn off the lights in my house and then be like, turn on my phone flashlight immediately because I was horrified it was in the dark. So it kind of got to me a bit, freaked me out. Although I didn't have any problem sleeping, mainly because it's a book. And like, I feel like I could control horror in books better. But yeah, being in the dark alone was not the best move. So yeah, it freaked me out. And overall, I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I took off an entire star for mainly just a couple things. One, the crucifix scene. It's unnecessary and gross that it was in the book. And also like the lazy writing with the follow-up, like the epilogue, where the kid's just better. There's no trauma here that they need to explore. Like, I feel like the kid would be quite traumatized from this. Kid seems fine. No, nothing was went into in that I feel like it should have been. So yeah, ultimately, this is a terrifying ass book. Be forewarned, it's horrifying. And William Peter Blatty wrote both the book and the movie, so the movie's pretty accurate. So yeah, wow, this is a lot. And I'm glad I read it, because now I can say I've read it, but like, I never want to read it again. Let me know in the comments down below, what was the scariest book you ever read? Like, I think this might be my scariest book I ever read. I think The Exorcist is going to be my #1 scary book. What's yours? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. If you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And if you want cool exclusive content, including a book club, you can consider becoming a channel member or a patron. The links for that are in the description down below. And on that note, I will see you guys soon. Bye!